Let's take a look at the contacts functionality in JobPro. So on the home screen we have the ability to click on the quick view arrow underneath the contacts module. And in here then we have a quick way of searching or selecting a contact by filtering out by customers, employees, or just on the contact name. You'll also notice in here that some contacts, they're linked to other companies, some aren't, and some are employees as well. So let's take a look at this contact here. This particular contact would have been created from a company record. So we can click on the company here and we can see here are the company details and any relevant contacts for that company. Alternatively, you might simply just create a new record, entering the contact details, and it may not be linked to a company at all. You might sell to individuals, so you can have your customers in the contacts module and not just at the company or organization level. So JobPro has the ability to separate out customers by companies and contacts, and the sales accounts module ties every customer together in who owes you money, where you can do statements and age analysis, so you don't have to go between two modules to find out and see any invoices relating to all your customers. So on the top of the contact screen we can enter in details, title, first name, last name, the type of contact, which you can specify and set up any types that you'd like to appear in this default drop down menu, their direct dial, their mobile number, email, the representative within your company that deals with this contact, any phone, home phone and fax details, and if they're linked to a company you'll see the company details here, but you can also link a new contact to a company by using the link button, and other company related information here as well. So you can then specify a default address for this contact. In this case it's coming from the company's default address, and then you can enter in a date of birth, whether the contact's inactive, or insert a photo for this contact here as well. So down the bottom of this screen we've got a communications tab on the general tab. So any communications like emails, notes, letters, faxes, SMS messages, anything even including outgoing phone calls that you've created relating to this contact will appear in here, and you can also create communications from here as well, like create an SMS message to this particular contact. The addresses tab is where you can put in multiple addresses for a contact. Now if a contact is linked to a company, then usually the address is what's used from the company's screen itself, but you can link any contact, whether it's linked to a company or not, to multiple addresses and have a default address for that contact. The inquiries tab will show you, especially if you're looking at a customer, any previous or existing sales inquiries for that customer. So let's for example just set this contact to a customer. The jobs tab will show you any jobs that this contact's related to. In this case these jobs are actually generated in relation to the company. So you can create a job and view job from here. You can then see defaults for this job, like the markup rate to use for budgeting purposes, or the default charge rate per hour to use for any new jobs that are created for this contact. It'll default then for any time logs that are created, will default to the charge out rate that's used on that job. So if the job charge out rate is left blank, then the employee's time log charge out rate will then be used instead on the job records. The tasks tab for the contact will show you any tasks that are related to that contact. The products tab will show you then if you want to link any specific pricing for products directly for this customer, which is an individual. You can add those items in here. They could be products or services, and when you add an item in, you can also put in price breaks for that item as well. You can also then specify for a customer or an individual what price category to automatically use. So for example, in the products module, where you'd set up all your products and services that you sell, you can then assign various price categories to those products or services. So then for every customer, whether the customer is a company or an individual like here, you can then link that customer to a default category. So on quotes, sales orders and invoices, when you input a product or services or anything there, it'll default to the pricing specific to, say, the retail price or the trade price, whatever is linked to that particular customer. Now if a product has got a specific pricing, well then all this gets ignored because the specific price is used on the quote or sales order or invoice. You can also assign a discount percentage to the contact as well. So across the board, when you add an item to a quote or an order or an invoice, unless they've got specific pricing, it'll apply a discount to that item on the line item of the transaction. Also on the right hand side of the screen, if you've sold any assets to this customer, now when I say an asset, what I'm referring to is anything that's tracked by serial number. So you might have assigned specific products in the products module to be tracked by their serial number, like for example equipment. So when you sell those items to a customer, they'll appear on the customer screen. The same functionality is also in the company module when you're selling to companies, and all that functionality you can look at in a separate video tutorial. So in here we have the ability then to create like a service or maintenance job relating to any asset or item or piece of equipment for that customer. So we can click on the little plus button here and it would create a job booking that item in on the job screen for that customer on the resources tab, and we could say that its purpose is for a general maintenance, and then we can put in the dates. We can also add in other contacts or resources that you're going to use on that maintenance job. So let's go back into contacts. For any customers that you're dealing with that might introduce new assets into the system, for example, you haven't sold them a specific item or a piece of equipment, but they need you to maybe repair or do a service on it. So what you can do then is you can click on the button here and you can introduce an item into the system for this specific customer. Now this message here we're getting is because this contact is linked to a company as well, and we're being asked, should the unit or asset be linked to the company as well or just the contact? Because you have the ability to separate out contacts from companies, so you could actually be treating this individual, even though they're linked to a customer, you could be treating the individual as a customer in their own right. Slightly unusual, but it is possible in this system to do that. Normally, if an individual is a customer, they're not actually linked to a company as such. Usually the company would be treated as the customer, where the company would have a sales account, but not the individual. So the next tab is for quotes, where you can create quotes or link to quotes in the system to view a quote. Then we've got sales orders, same type of functionality. See any existing sales orders, create or view those sales orders. And also the same for shipping records. So a shipping record in relation to a customer would most likely be a shipping out record, where you're shipping direct to the customer for products, or you're drop shipping, which usually would be from a purchase order that you've specified on the PO to your supplier to drop ship those items or item direct to the customer. So you'd see then a drop ship shipping record here. Or alternatively, the customer might have returned an item or goods to you and you'd see a shipping in record here flagged as a return. So that covers the shipping tab. The account tab is specific to customer records that are individuals when you're in the contacts module. So in here we can see any invoices relating to this customer, and also we can create a sales account as well. So for example, if this was a customer and not linked to a company, the system would automatically generate at the contact level a sales account for that individual. Now in this particular case, this individual is linked to a company, so the company would have a sales account record created, because essentially the company is the customer and the individual would be just somebody that works for that company. So in this particular example, we wouldn't necessarily create a sales account, but we can still see any invoices that this contact for that company is linked to. The documents module is where you can link or add new documents to this specific contact. So let's say, for example, we want to add a document. We can link to an existing document where we can get a filter screen to show all documents that are linked to the system. Now these could be documents that are linked to jobs or linked to other contacts or companies, where we can select those. So let's say, for example, we select this manual here and it's a PDF. So now we've got two documents linked to this company or this contact. So if we want to view then an actual document, click on the arrow and we're brought into the full document screen, where we can see that this document is linked to a company and it's also linked to this contact that we're dealing with here. And on this screen we can also interact with this PDF within the document portal. Or we can click on the little icon here to view a full screen for the PDF, where we can scroll down. Or if you've got a larger monitor, you can increase the size of the window so you can see the full PDF in the window on your monitor. So let's go back into the contact. That covers the Documents tab here. So on the other tab, we've got the ability to create other details, which could be absolutely anything. You can type in a heading, you can type in details in here. And you've also the ability to link a contact to a group. So it might be, for example, a committee or some sort of a membership group, or absolutely any group. For example, you could create groups for marketing purposes, so that you can then assign people to certain groups, and then you can search on those groups, pull up like a found set of records that you might want to mail shot or send a mass mailing to, or like a mail merge by email, letter or fax or SMS. So the group functionality is something that you have in contacts, you also have it in companies, and you also have it in other modules like jobs and products, where you can group things together, like a campaign of jobs for advertising purposes. So on the right hand side then we've got custom fields for a contact. In setup you can specify, when you create a contact record or any other module that has custom fields, you can specify what you want to call your custom fields. So those labels will be specific to what you have in setup, and then you can type in whatever information you want in those fields. So that covers looking at the contacts module from a point of view of general contacts or customers that you have in the contacts module as individuals. So let's now look at the contacts module from a point of view of employees. So if we click on list, and in here let's take a look at an employee record. So the top part of the screen is very much the same, where you can put in a default address for that employee, their contact information. You can actually also link an employee to a company. So what you might like to do is set up a company record for your own company. So you do that in the company module, and then from either the company module or within contacts you can add then your employees. So you can link them from within here to the company record you set up. Now down the bottom part of the screen, the general tab is the same, where you've got any communications relating to this employee in this case. You can create communications like send an SMS message or send them an internal message within JobPro. So everything here uses the communications module. You've also the ability to put in multiple addresses for an employee if you need to. But from here on in, we've got different sets of tabs when you're looking at an employee. So the first one is the personal tab, where you can put in the marital status or any other information relating to the employee, like their start date, finish date for employment. or put in emergency contacts for that employee. Then on the Rates and Wages tab, we can specify the employee type, which you can specify in Setup the default values you'd want to appear in these drop-down menus. Employment type, work type, paid by, for example, and other information on the left-hand side. So then in the employment section over on the right-hand side, you can have as many reviews, or basically you'll always have one current employment line where you've got the start date, the current wage, whether that's per year, week, month, etc. And then we've got a rate section, so you can have the normal rate per hour. So that's the cost of this employee to your company, and you can include like overheads in here. So it's the total cost for this employee. So when you log time, or the employee logs time on jobs or tasks in the system, you can then get a cost for that at the job level. So you can get proper job costing figures in jobs for employee charge rates over here, but their rate to your company as well will also appear as a cost on that job or jobs. So you can also put in the overtime rate as well. But now their charge out rate is what's used from a billing purposes on time logs that are related to jobs and tasks. So if, for example, you've got a job, you can either use A, the employee's charge out rate per hour, or B, you can specify at the job level a default rate per hour across the board for all employees for that job. You can also specify a daily rate in here for the employee. So you can book in employee as a resource on a job. So it might be a daily rate, for example. If that person is just going to go out on site and work with that customer for that job, well then you can put a flat rate and you can have the default in here used. So when you create an invoice from the chargeable costs and resources on a job, it'll automatically use the employee's daily rate per hour, or you can set from a resource charge out rate point of view that'll use a charge out rate per hour instead. So that covers the rate section. The next tab is expenses. Now in here for an employee, they can log maybe expenses that they're personally incurring, and they can also then see the costs that they've incurred, and you can then put in a debit and credit whether they've been paid back, for example. So you can show totals and current balance owing to the employee. You can also print off an expenses report from here as well. And to create an expense, you just click on the little icon here. So if an employee logs an expense that's a product, and that product is tracked in stock, well then based on the quantity, it'll get reduced from stock by that amount. So the next tab is leave. So like annual leave, holidays, sick leave, anything in here like days off can be logged specific to this employee. Now all of this information will also display in the calendar on the resources tab in the calendar. So basically you can use the resources tab to see what employees are available on what days for any given day, week or month. And you can filter out on the resources tab in the calendar for employee leave only. So you can see across a month, for example, for all employees, who's taken holidays and when. Now the functionality relating to the resource and the calendar screens are available in other video tutorials, so we don't need to go in there now. But in here anyway, we can log all the different holidays or leave for this employee and sick days, whether or not to deduct those days, and over on the right hand side we can put in the days accumulated. So for example, they started off on a particular date, and then for that period the regulations were that employees get 2.5 days per month, and that will have added up a total. So now under normal circumstances you'll have a lot more information on this screen, deducting giving a smaller balance. But then let's say the regulation changes, you can then add in a new line and when that start date was, and it'll default to a value that you can specify in setup for your default days per month for employees. So then based on that to today, that employee has earned 53 holidays, or 53 days for holidays or time off, and those holidays will then get deducted as incurred on this part of the screen here. So in setup you can put in your default days per month. So let's have a quick look at that. Go into setup, then into contacts. Down the bottom here then we can put in our default holiday days per month. And when you change this, it says that changing the default holiday leave per month will automatically affect new employee records that are entered after this change. So in other words, you may need to change existing records. So let's go back into contacts. So for any new days accumulated we add over on the right hand side, it'll use the default from setup. So the next tab is documents, and that's very much the same as any documents tab you see in every module in the system, where you can link a document, whether it's an existing document or a new document, to this employee screen. The next is the user prefs tab. So on the left hand side of the user prefs tab for this employee, we can specify, for example, that when we print documents, external documents like quotes, requests for quotes to suppliers, purchase orders, sales invoice, shipping documents, and also areas like statements and other documents that are external, you can specify for this employee to use a specific language. Now you can also set a lot of these defaults in setup as well, and not necessarily do it at the employee level. You also have the ability to specify that when this employee logs in, what quick view screen should they see when they log in. For example, with this employee, they want to see the time log tab when they log in on the quick view screen. So what happens there is that when this employee logs in, the initial screen they'll see is the time log tab, and that's useful for if certain employees are logging time during the day. Well, then the first screen they're going to see is their time log screen to remind them to start putting in time logs. But other employees, let's say from a financial basis, they might want to see, what sales invoices are outstanding. So they might want that screen to default when they log in. So that's what that preference is on the employee user prefs tab. We can also specify that on login to set the JobPro window size to either the minimum size, the maximum size of your monitor, or the current size that you've set the window, the JobPro window here. So you could resize the JobPro window on your monitor and then select current size. And that basically will store the dimensions of the current window size of JobPro, so that when you log in, it'll always position it to that size. The next option we have is to display tooltips over non-text buttons. Now you can also set this at a global level for all users in setup. But if, for example, some users already know the system fairly well, they can turn on or off the ability that when they hover over any of these icons throughout the system, it'll show them a tooltip of what it will happen if they click on it. For example, hovering over the mobile icon will show you that you can hold down the shift key to create an SMS message. So this is useful for any users that are learning the system especially. Then the next option is to specify the extension number for the employee. Now this is in particular use for if you're using the Asterisk phone software within JobPro, which you can turn on in setup. Now Asterisk is a phone system that you can use on Mac or Windows Server to basically set up like a proper phone system on your network. And when you make a call from within JobPro, as long as you've specified the extension number for that employee, then the phone will start ringing out on your handset on your desk. And this is a very productive feature in JobPro. So you don't have to be typing in numbers all the time if you make a lot of phone calls. But also making phone calls using the internet or VoIP software will save a lot of cost as well. So then underneath this we've got an option in relation to alerts and reminders. So the alerts functionality is where if, for example, you've got tasks and you want to get reminders or alerts in relation to those, you can set up alerts in the task screen down here for multiple contacts as well. But also alerts will be in relation to new messages from other JobPro users that might send you an internal message on the system. So that can be done through the comms module as well. So here you have the ability to specify yes to check for new messages from the comms module and new tasks due as well that are you need to get a reminder to go and perform a task. You can also then specify how often that the system should check for new messages. So here we have the ability to specify to display the alert dialog box when you do get a new alert. So that's like a pop-up message to say you've got a new alert. But also you can specify to bring the alerts window to the front. So if we take a quick look at what the alerts window looks like, you can specify or resize the alerts window anywhere on screen. And if you've got it set to full size, well then it'll show it the same size as the JobPro window. So here then this option will bring this window to the front and you can see, oh yeah, there's a new alert in relation to a task, and I can then click on that task and it brings me into the task module. So let's go back into contacts. Under system login details, we have the ability to specify for every user that needs to log in, they need their username and password entered. And also, if you're using the single user version of JobPro, you can specify to set user as the default login. So this means that when you go and log in and you're given the login dialog box, it'll automatically put in your username and you can just put in your password instead. So this is saying that this will insert the username in the employee in the login dialog box for all users that are logging in. Now it's giving a warning here because this system is actually a multi-user system. So normally you'd only do this if you were a single user. The next option then is to assign the employee to an access group. So in setup under access privileges, you can create multiple access groups, and for each group you can specify what that group can or cannot do throughout the system. Like, can they go into the invoices module? Can they create an invoice, delete invoices? Same in all the different modules. You've got lots and lots of different options for controlling users. So in here then you're going to specify which group to assign to this employee. You can also specify an access privilege so that each user or employee, whether they have the ability to view any of these tabs for both their own employee record or for other employee records as well. So you might, for example, want an employee to view certain tabs for their record but not other employees. But you also have the ability to control if a user is allowed into this screen, the user pref screen, whether they can see what access group they have been assigned to as well. So that covers the user prefs tab. Then the other tab is very similar to if you're looking at a general customer or contact, where you can add in other details relating to this employee. It can be absolutely anything you like. Put in a heading and put in some details. Then you can link this employee to a group. So it makes it easy then to search on groups of people, whether they're employees or just general contacts. And you can also then set up your own custom fields in setup. So you can specify what you want to call your custom 1, 2 and 3 fields. And that you do in setup. That's covered in a separate video tutorial to do with setup and preferences. So that covers the employee tabs. So in the contacts module, you could, for example, be looking at a list of general contacts, customers, employees, or you can search to just pull up specific sets of contacts, maybe for doing a mail shot or a mail merge. You can export information for contacts as well. Assuming that you've got the access right or access privilege to do so, you can then select export records. But also on the list screen in contacts, you can see if a contact is linked to a company, and you can go and view that company from here. let's go back to the contact. So by clicking on that will bring us into the full contact screen, or we can go back to list and view the list we were currently looking at. So also on the options tab in contacts, we've got various options like find options, find active contacts, find active employees. We can do expense reports in here. So when we click on that, we're given the ability to filter out or find specific expenses based on like certain product types, whether items are billable or not, various other information including employee specific information. So you could, for example, use this functionality for doing mileage reports. So you'd enter in your criteria and then you'd press continue to generate your expense reports. Now this functionality is useful for employees that are logging expenses and they want to print off expense reports from here. So then in the middle of the screen we could be looking at, for example, a customer who's a contact, where we can create an inquiry, quotation, various other options that we also have the ability to do from the specific tabs that are shown on the contact screen. We could also print a label for that contact. Or over on the right hand side, for the found set of contacts that we're currently looking at in the contacts module, we then have the ability to print off labels or do a mail shot for the current found set, like do an email blast, a mail merge, or we can do, for example, a letter or fax mail shot, or we can also send out a group SMS mail shot to that found set of records. Now the functionality relating to these areas here, like creating mail shots, they're covered in separate video tutorials. So that covers the contacts functionality in JobPro. Obviously the contacts module and functionality is used throughout the system, like linking into the comms module, what contacts are linked to jobs, what resources like employees are used on jobs and tasks, what employees are logging time, etc. So the contacts module is a separate module but tied into various other modules as well.